with the Ukrainian government as well as local governments like the Polish.
Mr. West.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I will answer questions 4, 14, 17 and 23 together. Russia's assault on Ukraine is unprovoked, premeditated, barbaric and an assault on a sovereign democracy, and the UK has committed £220 million of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and the region. We are in regular contact with our allies across the world, as well as international agencies such as the UN and other humanitarian partners and donors, to assess the needs on the ground and to ensure an internationally coordinated response. We call upon Russia to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law.
Liz Twist.
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely vital that those humanitarian corridors remain open to facilitate the safe passage of refugees from Ukraine, as well as the safe passage of humanitarian aid into the country. So what steps has the Minister taken in conjunction with NATO allies to ensure that that happens?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we note Russia's claim of creating humanitarian corridors. These are just not credible. The current humanitarian corridors that Russia have highlighted lead into Russia, and it is an obscene and offensive gesture to the Ukrainian people to invite them to take refuge in the arms of the country currently seeking to destroy theirs. It is not credible, and we call upon Russia to allow proper, meaningful humanitarian access.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. A constituent trying to help her elderly and disabled relatives out of Ukraine described their arduous 19-hour journey from the south to leave for biometric enrolment due to the lack of safe routes in the south. They are now awaiting an appointment in Poland, but who knows how long that will take. They need to know, like others have asked today, what more the Foreign Office will do with the Home Office to make this process quicker and more effective.
Mr. Speaker, as my right honourable friend said, the Home Office has established a forward presence, including just over the Ukrainian border into Poland, in order to facilitate cases like the one that she has just raised. We continue working closely with the Home Office to ensure that their work on receiving Ukrainian refugees is quick and as effective and as efficient as possible.
Bel Ribeiro Addy. Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mariupol has been described as a living hell by those who've been subject to the vicious bombardment in the city. Can the Minister say what the government is doing to get people who are under siege, including brave Halo staff, rescued into some safety?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable and gallant gentleman raises an incredibly important point. Our ability to project project influence into Ukraine is understandably heavily curtailed. We will continue working to ensure that potential abuses, human rights abuses, are catalogued and put forward for subsequent trials in the ICC and other places if relevant. And I take the point about what more can be done to help the brave people who have stayed behind to do great work in Ukraine, what we can do to help them evacuate the country. I can't give him details at the moment, but his point is well made.
Caroline Down.
Speaker, the Foreign Secretary has spoken about the work ongoing with the Home Office to process applications of refugees coming over the border into Poland, but we also know people are flooding over the borders into Romania, into Hungary, into other neighbouring Moldova, other neighbouring countries. What more can we do on the ground in those countries to help swiftly get people to our shores?
Minister.
The honourable lady, my honourable friend, raises a very important point. The Home Office have established a forward presence, as we said, in Poland, but also in the other countries bordering Ukraine to facilitate the forward passage for those wishing to come to the UK. The Prime Minister, the Home Secretary have made it clear we intend to have a generous offer to the Ukrainian people, a refuge to those seeking that, and we will continue coordinating with the Home Office in their work to establish routes to the UK.
John Burrell.
Partly for humanitarian reasons, there are siren voices suggesting that we should commit to a no-fly zone in Ukraine, notwithstanding our existing support to the country, notwithstanding our commitment to Article 5 and to NATO. Will he assure the House once again that there is no intention to intervene directly, militarily, in this war, for a host of reasons, including the fact it would lead to a wider conflict?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the UK should be rightly proud of the support that we gave to the Ukrainian armed forces over a number of years through Operation Orbital, through the early deployment of NLAWs, those anti-tank missile systems which have proven so effective, and we will continue to provide support to the Ukrainians in their self-defence. The Secretary-General of NATO has made it very, very clear that it would be wrong for the for NATO to engage directly in conflict with Russia, which is the inevitable byproduct of a no-fly zone. Putin is desperately trying to paint this as Western aggression against Russia. We must not do anything which will allow him to perpetrate that perverse distortion of reality.
Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But could I ask my right honourable friend, if, God forbid, Russian forces start to deliberately attack nuclear facilities near the western borders, what is my right honourable friend having conversations about contingency plans which would need to lead to a mass movement of the refugees already in that area? And would he agree with me that that pretty much constitutes an attack on NATO allies?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we take very seriously the attacks or the threat of attacks against nuclear facility. Nuclear safeguarding remains a priority for this government. I won't be drawn on the conditions of what might be defined as an attack on NATO, but nevertheless, we have made it absolutely clear that NATO is a defensive organisation. It has never expanded by force or coercion. Our support to the Ukrainians is steadfast, but there is a clear dividing line between an attack on one of our good friends, that is Ukraine, and an attack on a NATO member state.
Minister Pleatgill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This International Women's Day, hundreds of thousands of women are massed in the freezing cold at the borders of Ukraine, traumatised children in their arms as they flee from Putin's bloody, unprovoked war. Families have been separated, thousands of homes destroyed, whole cities cut off from water, food, healthcare and other basic services. This is an evolving humanitarian situation, and the pace and scale of displacement is unlike anything we've seen in Europe for a generation. 2 million refugees have already fled the country, and millions more may cross the border in the coming days and weeks. So can the Minister please tell us today how much of the 220 million announced actually for humanitarian aid is within Ukraine, and that for those that have fled the borders? And will he agree to provide us with a monthly breakdown of pledges against what has actually been dispersed? We've got to act swiftly, and we do need to know what has been dispersed to date. So will he tell us?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady makes the point this is a rapidly evolving situation. We have made recent announcements of humanitarian support, which are very significant, the largest in the world at this stage. We will, of course, be more than happy to keep the House up to date with the dispersal of that humanitarian aid, and we will do that through the normal means.
Gareth Davis.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker.